Welcome to another book club episode of Homeschool Moms Unfiltered. I am your host, Meagan, and my lovely fellow bookworm co-host is...
Hi, I'm Amanda.
Excellent. So if you heard book club and had a minor panic attack, please don't worry. You are welcome to read along, but you definitely don't have to. In fact, you are more than welcome to just hang out here with us and listen to us discuss the book this week.
Yep, absolutely. I would say that at least 50% of the time, I'm the friend that shows up to book club without having read the book. Not for our own. I make myself read for our own, even if it is absolute last minute. But when I show up, I'm totally interested in hearing what everyone else thought about what they read. I love that part. But then also, I usually feel guilty and like a book club fraud, and it's a whole situation. There shall be none of that here. Okay. If you're just randomly catching us for the first time, we also drop regular podcast episodes every Tuesday for progressive secular homeschoolers.
Progressive and secular, you may ask? Yes, we exist. We promise not to weave God or Bible verses into our podcast or our curriculum suggestions. It also means we believe we should be moving towards universal healthcare, not cutting Medicare and Medicaid. We believe Black Lives Matter, trans rights and women's rights are human rights. No human being is illegal, and so much more. So if those statements resonate with you, welcome. You have found your people.
Yes. And while we definitely don't weave God into our podcast or our curriculum suggestions, we are sort of tackling it in a different way starting next week. So we often see these questions in secular homeschool groups about how to teach religion from a secular point of view or perspective, especially Christianity as a school topic, not religious indoctrination. So we are going to be reading and reviewing several of the books that often get suggested and recommended, starting with David McAfee's The Belief Book. If you're watching the video or you're seeing us on YouTube, this is what it looks like. But you can also check out our social media if you want to see a picture of the actual cover to make sure you got the right book. I'm really big on that. Like I hate trying to buy a specific book without having seen the cover. That's how my brain works. I need to be able to see it. So we'll make sure we stick the picture up on our social media in a few different places. Okay, so this week we are finally wrapping up the Debbie Reber book, Differently Wired. So we weren't like that book club in Austin where they've been working on the same book for 12 years, but it is definitely time that we wrap this particular book up like 3 months in or something. So the final two tilts 17 and 18. Here we go.
Excellent. Okay, before we dive into the book, I would love to just kick off with a general, I'm sorry if I have some background noise today. We are in Miami sorting out our storage unit this week, and we're staying in a Marriott, and the Wi-Fi is horrendous. And so I am working at one of those public computer stations in the front lobby today. And right where they are, just next door, is the entrance to where all of the housekeeping staff go in and out and the maintenance staff. And so all of a sudden there will be like this explosion of people coming in or out or whatever. And so I shall do my best to mute and edit creatively after the fact and all of that. But if you do get a little background noise from me, I apologize. I'm doing my best. It's that whole thing that we talk about in our regular episodes about not presenting a perfect and polished image. I am totally in the lobby of a Marriott today. So here we go.
Well, and the thing is like, it's such a first world problem. But once you manage to achieve status with a hotel chain, you're supposed to get like their premium Wi-Fi for free without having to pay for it. And it is so frustrating when that premium Wi-Fi still isn't strong enough to be able to record the podcast, right? It's like, oh, come on.
I mean, not for nothing. My Marriott status is really freaking high, not because of us, like, oh, we're gazillionaires, but my husband traveled like permanently for work. And so we've achieved lifetime status at like a very high level. We landed back in Florida the other day and we got here at 2:00 in the morning. Our flight was delayed and our room had been given away, which is never like, we are guaranteed a room.
Yeah.
So I'm having like some serious Marriott issues this week. Like it's not been going well.
Yeah.
I know. They were like, but we have another room for you and it's just right across the street and whatever. It was like a 10-minute walk across the street, which wasn't bad, except it was 2 a.m. and we had our bags and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I'm like, we've worked pretty hard to get this status. Could you please get me some internet that works and not give away my room? It would be nice, you know?
Yikes.
But yeah, you're very right. It's a very first world problem. So I'm in the lobby and I'm making it work.
All right. So, Tilt 17. It is titled Help Your Kids Embrace Self-Discovery. So, the first subsection is called The Gifts of Self-Knowledge. I think you might have the first quote.
I do. I've got a few quotes here. I've got one that says, I'm convinced the greatest gift we can give our differently wired kids is the knowledge of who they are, how their brain works, and what they need to do to create the life they want. And then skip a sentence and go down. It says, many parents shy away from talking openly with their child about the way they're wired because they want to protect them. They don't want their child to feel quote unquote different or flawed. And we'll talk a little bit more about that on the next page, because I know we've got a similar quote there. But and I get it. It's a journey and it's a spectrum. And when parents get this news that their child has A, B, C, D, E, F, G letters associated with their name and all these acronyms and whatever, I get it. There's this panic and there's this, I don't know what to do. And there might be some, we've talked about it from this book, like some grieving and all that. But, you know, being so far into this, like the thought of not telling your kids how their brains work to me is just like, oh my gosh. So if I can give you any insight from 10 years on, don't do that. There's nothing good that comes from doing that, right? You have got to let them know. Yeah, you have got to let them know what their diagnosis is, how their brain works, what that means for them. I mean, they just have to know. And we've both got the same quote on the next page if you want to tackle it. But I mean, there's really big consequences to keeping them in the dark.
Yeah. And I mean, look, I'm not going to downplay the like, what do we do with this once you have it? I only have one kiddo. We didn't think that there were any kind of huge, crazy things going on when we first went for our assessment. And so, yes, we wanted answers, but we weren't entirely sure what answers we were going to get. And because it was our first time and kiddo was a little older, like there were just a lot of pieces in this scenario where I wasn't ready to like immediately be like, hey, this is what Dr. Bonnie said, like trying to figure out what we were going to do with that. It took a little bit of time. It took time for me to have, like the first conversation with the person who did our evaluation. Like it was just me and my husband. And it took us a little bit of like really reading the report and getting our heads around what we were reading and what we were understanding, and a couple of conversations with our evaluator and all of those things before we were ready to have that conversation with our kiddo about what we found out and what that meant. Like, I'm not going to sit here and tell you like, oh, it doesn't matter. Like, as soon, right away. And, like it's understandable if you need some time to process it and figure out what the hell you're going to do with this alphabet soup yourself as the adult in the room. But yeah, like ultimately you really do need to work to get to a place where you can share it with your kiddo in a pretty timely manner, because as page 246 says, quote, yet most of the time, these kids know something is up. They just don't know exactly what. And so they develop their own theories for why they're always getting in trouble or bombing in math or not connecting with other kids their age. Like, kids are smart. We don't give them nearly enough credit the vast majority of the time. They know when things are wonky, they know when something's up, and they will create a story to fill in the gaps. And the vast, vast majority of the time, the truth is so much better, right? Like, and there's nothing wrong with having a diagnosis. There is never anything wrong with having a diagnosis. It just gives you the knowledge you need to handle it in the most effective way you can.
Yeah, I mean, it says in that same paragraph that you were just reading from, without context or information, they might conclude that they're defective or broken, disappointing their parents, and or aren't as smart as everyone else. So they're forming opinions based upon their life experience, and defective and broken is a way worse label to assign yourself than autistic or ADHD. Way worse, right? Especially if you can then color in the lines of what that ADHD diagnosis means or what being autistic means. And you're like, oh, this is not defective or broken. This is different. And I've got this. This is where I shine. This is where I need a little support. This is who I am. I mean, it's huge.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I think I have the next note here at the end of that section, which for me is page 246 in Kindle Land. She's talking about her own experience. And she says, years later, when we got the more formal diagnoses, we sat him down, meaning her kiddo, and told him what we'd learned. His immediate thought when he found out was, yeah, that makes sense. And his immediate emotion, relief. He wasn't broken or bad or screwing up. He was wired differently. And then it says in parentheses, actually wired better in his opinion. I definitely have a kiddo that would associate with that, I think, in some ways as well. But it's interesting because I had seen a thing online one time about one of the side effects, quote unquote, of ADHD medication being rage, and not that being like an actual pharmaceutical side effect, but the rage coming from the fact that you're like, I have raw dogged this my entire life. And no one told me that this was available to me and that my life could look like this or could feel like this. And that there's this rageful component of like, I've been robbed of the time that no one offered me this, where I didn't have these tools at my disposal. And so I kind of thought of that when I read this here, because I thought, yeah, that's a pretty powerful statement to be thinking, like, I'm pretty pissed off that I didn't have this when I was going through school or whatever the case might be.
Yeah. And I think parents who deny their kids medication for no reason other than like well, we're not going to medicate our kid. They're not, they're just not thinking from that regard. And it's so unfortunate. There's no guarantee that medication is going to work or that it's going to be helpful at all. The reality is it's one of those things you don't know unless you try it. And you should absolutely engage your kiddo in making those decisions and allowing them to be a part of that decision making process, right?
Absolutely. Hmm.
Kind of like the kids that are adults now talking about how they had to go get all of the children's vaccinations because their parents refused to vaccinate them, and like, yeah, just yeah. Okay, so the next section is called Why Getting Kids Invested Matters. And so I just pulled out the kind of first quote from the very first chapter on page 247. She says, "The adage, knowledge is power, couldn't be truer than it is for our kids. Because the kind of knowledge we're talking about here, it has the capacity to empower our kids to not only feel good about their differences, but fully own and embrace every aspect of who they are." And for me, it was just that thing. We say knowledge is power all of the time in our regular podcast episodes, right? And this is the reason why. This is the reason why.
Yeah. I mean, 100%. It's like a non-negotiable. They have to know, right? They have to know. And there was a thing the other day in one of the Facebook groups that I'm in. I don't remember which one, and if to tell you if you were in it or not, but it was some person who was like, where can I get an assessment for autism and ADHD that won't cost an arm and a leg? And, there were people who were like, try this, try that, try whatever. And I was like, I felt like a jerk to chime in, but I was like, no, it does cost an arm and a leg. And I know that sucks. And that's not the way society should work. But I'm like, if you go through the school system, they have a financial benefit to telling you that your kid is fine. If you go to the county department or whatever, like the health screening, they have different names in every state we've lived in, but it's always like early start or, one of those kinds of
First
things.
5, yeah.
Yeah, all that kind of stuff, right? And I'm like, it's like the fast food version of testing, because it's just like run of the mill, get them in, get them out, super high level, super cursory. The same thing at most pediatricians too, right? They do that initial screener for ADHD and they're like, yep, they have ADHD. You want a prescription? Yes, no, whatever. And that's not enough. It's just not. And it sucks because we both know it's freaking expensive, and it's beyond expensive, hard to also get as far as just finding a provider who doesn't have a wait list that's 2 years long and all that. We know it's hard, but unfortunately that's what it is. That's
Yeah.
how it works here.
I mean, at least for now, right? This could absolutely change, but at least for now, if you're looking at autism and ADHD, there's a very good chance you can get your insurance to cover that. But start now, because the providers that will take insurance, they've got 18-month wait lists. So you want to get on the wait list. But it's going to take hours. It might very well take hours over multiple days. My experience was that full assessment and evaluation is like huge if you're homeschooling, especially. We got such good information, such helpful information, real specific things to do and not to do, and then general ideas. Like, it's stupidly expensive. But I think, especially if you're homeschooling, if there's any way you can save up for it and make it work, or work through your insurance and with your pediatrician to get the correct referrals to be able to get insurance to mostly cover it, it's so valuable to have a really, really good, solid evaluation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. All right. I think I have the next note. It's in the section called Nurture a Culture of Openness and Honesty. And she talks about rating yourself on a scale of 1 to 10 about how open and honest you are with your kids. So it's like, do you avoid talking about current events in age appropriate ways to quote unquote protect your child? Do you minimize or downplay things that are difficult? But then there's one that says, do you bend the truth or avoid challenges and disappointment? And I'm like, yeah, you know what, Debbie Reber? I fucking do. I do. Because if you would like to come over and explain to my child that my meeting went long and we can now not go karting because of that, I will let you handle that. It is so much easier for me to say, go karting got canceled today. I mean, all sorts of things have been canceled in our world. Disney World's been closed sometimes. I mean, you name it. Things have been closed, things have been canceled. I mean, listen, there's just only so much energy I have in a day. There's only so many spoons I have. And like sometimes I meet the challenge head on, and other times go-karting was canceled. Like I can't. We're talking ideal world situation here. The reality is sometimes you need to just get from point A to point B as quickly as possible and with as minimal catastrophic damage as possible. And if you have a deeply feeling, highly emotional, highly sensitive kid, sometimes in my world, that's how it works. So don't feel bad if you're doing the same thing. I don't feel bad.
There you go. Sometimes you need to bend the truth.
I'm totally done. Only with one kid, but it's the kiddo that needs it most, you know? And then I think I have the next note as well in that same section on 249, which talks about don't shy away from difficult conversations. And I think it's the same thing. Like, generally speaking, there are certain things that, yes, I will go all in on. You know, you want to know where babies come from? I'm going to tell you the full truth of where babies come from to the best of my horrendously uneducated lack of science and my own education ability. I'll give you the basics. Okay. The rest we can Google. But I'm going to tell you the whole thing. I'm going to tell you how people have babies. I'm going to tell you about abortions. I'm going to tell you about birth control. I'm going to tell you how same-sex couples have babies. I'm going to tell you the whole thing. But then there's other things, like I've talked about it in the past. Like when my husband had cancer, there was plenty that we didn't share with our kids, right? Like they were too young. If it happened again today, that would be a different story. But when they were very young, it was more than they could handle. It was more than I could handle. And I was a grown ass adult. So, you know, I just think, you know, your kids best. Like, don't shy away from all the difficult conversations. But if you know that there's something that's going to stress your kids more than it benefits your kids, it's kind of like when you're deciding on whether or not to take a new medication and you look at the benefits of the medication versus the side effects of the medication, and you kind of have to weigh that and figure out where your tipping point is. I feel like some of this stuff is the same as well.
Yeah. I guess I just think you need to be really conscious of the fact that if you are nurturing a culture of openness and honesty, like she's talking about in this section, and you are trying to make it like, hey, we share all of the things, we can talk about all of the things. If you take specific things that you don't share with openness and honesty, at some point that's going to come back and bite you in the ass. At some point your kids are going to be like, wait a minute, this thing happened in the past. Like, I'm old enough to know, or they're going to find out, right? Whatever that is. It could be a health thing that happened when they were little. It could be maybe that they're adopted, or that they were an embryo adoption. I have that with one friend, and like this struggle of like, at what point do we actually tell them, and trying to make sure you do it at the right time. And the reality is, as the parent, the vast majority of the time, when you finally get around to deciding it's the right time for them, it's far enough along the timeline for them that they're like, why the hell didn't you tell me before? I think you waited too long to tell me. So again, as parents, we're always making these decisions. They're not easy. and you're going to do the best that you can, but just be prepared for there to be some pushback if you have developed this culture of openness and then you're not completely open about something. Your kids are going to call you on it, as they should, right? As they should, but they're going to call you on it, and you're going to have to be like, well, we did the best we could with what we knew, and maybe someday you'll be in the same position. Good luck.
No, I totally agree with what you're saying. It had come back to bite me in the ass on two fronts. So one of my kids was like, "We can't believe you didn't tell us when Dad was," and I was like, "Yeah, you were 5. You don't get to make that choice." Right? Like, and I literally was just like, "Sorry, we include you in things. You have so much autonomy over your lives." That was one where I got to like pull the mom card and decide what was best for you at that time. And that's what I did, So that was one. And then I will say, I don't know who listens without earbuds. So I'm just going to say like earmuffs. If anybody is listening and there's little ears, like I'm giving you a nice chunk of time here to pause before I say my next statement, because if you have little ears around, I don't want to get blamed for any of this. Here it comes. The other one was Santa Claus, and it was epic. It was, I mean, we're Jewish too. So it was literally just for fun. Like, it was just fun, but it was like, I cannot believe that you lied to it. Like, I mean, it was same kid. And then interestingly, and it's funny because had I to do it all over again, I would have done the whole thing very, very differently, because when they were little, I did it the way my parents did it, which was just like hoopla and fun and the whole thing and all of that. Hello, everyone. Pardon the interjection here. This is Meagan. I am editing the episode, and I had mentioned at the start of the episode that I was recording at the hotel and my internet was terrible and all of that. And in this section of the recording, I just completely disappear. I'm not on the video. My audio is not there. And we can see Amanda nodding along in that section. I've since cut it out, but we can see her kind of nodding along and interjecting a little bit here and there. But my audio is gone. So please allow me to just kind of fill in the gap in that audio section here for you. The first thing that I was talking about was the fact that I would do Santa Claus very, very differently if I had it to do all over again from a socioeconomic perspective. I did it the way my parents did it. And so I just introduced the whole concept, and it was meant to be fun and it was meant to be light. And then as I emerged from the very sheltered bubble that I grew up in and realized the way that it impacts kids who are economically less advantaged, it's devastating, right? The thought that these kids are going to go back to school in January or go back to sports or whatever it might be. And, one kid says, I got a Lego Death Star and a new iPad and a this and a that. And then there's another kid who got a book and who got some new underwear and got a few other things, right? And that they don't understand, because the cultural storyline is that these gifts were tied to how good you were. And so the thought that a child whose parents can't afford to do what another parent can do, thinking that they are less good or less valued, is just heartbreaking. And so, yes, I would have done that part very, very differently. But then I started also talking about the way that my 13-year-old found out the truth behind all of the magic. And you'll hear that when the recording picks back up here, that he found out way sooner than he was emotionally ready to. Unfortunately, the wicked witch Alexa told him. She made an announcement about a delivery that I had put on my mom's account, even. Like, I don't even know how it ended up on our Alexa. And then when he heard that, he's a very curious child, and he decided to ask some probing questions, and she told him the whole truth and nothing but the truth. So unfortunately, he found out far before he was ready, and he was devastated. I mean, on a level that was just unreal. Like, my whole life has been a lie kind of stuff, and just days and days of sobbing. And all of my kids watched that play out, and I think all of my children will probably address things like Santa, Easter Bunny, Tooth Fairy, all of that very differently as a result of how it all played out. But we will join the regularly scheduled recording, and forgive my little interlude and intermission here. I'm not quite sure what happened with my audio at the time of recording, but thankfully, for the most part, this was the only major hiccup in the recording of the episode. And so he found out before he was ready, which was also part of it. But I mean, there was absolute hysteria, and like, my whole life has been a lie. And literally for the next 24 to 48 hours, and this is my highly sensitive, deeply feeling kid, which again, you don't know that when you introduce this stuff when they're little. And we were already doing it with older siblings, so he just kind of got wrapped into it. But literally for a couple of days afterwards, like, I will never forget, I was tucking him in bed, and you could tell he had something he wanted to say, but he was like scared or like hesitant to say it. And I was like, uh-huh. I'm like, just say it. It's okay. It's going to be okay. Like all that, and he goes like trembling lip and he goes, Mickey Mouse. And I'm like, yeah, it's another one. Like, and it just kept cascading. It was like one after the next, after the next. And he was just, I mean, he was inconsolable. It was awful. So that was actually the worst of the two. Had I to do it all over again, that's the one that I would change. I would still do the cancer thing exactly the same way, but Mickey Mouse and I never specifically said to him, that's a real giant walking, talking mouse. That was an assumption that he made, but I also didn't stop it.
Yeah.
And so, but yeah, like Santa, the Tooth Fairy, the Easter Bunny, Mickey Mouse, I mean, it was bad. It was really, really bad. So yeah, I would do that all very, very differently had I to do it again.
Yeah. They will call you on those things.
Yeah.
And again, like you said, if you are, I feel like we've done a pretty good job in our house, and I know you've done a good job in your house of creating this culture of openness and honesty. And when you include your kids on almost everything, sometimes you can say, look, I have to pull the mom card. Like, I'm sorry. I know you, I would love to have time to explain to you why I need to do XYZ, but I need you to do this right now. Or, I mean, they're just situations, there are circumstances, but as long as the general culture is there, it's a lot easier to navigate those times when occasionally you do need to just pull the parent card, and it is what it is.
Yeah.
All right. So the next section is called Explore Brain Science with Your Kids. I'm not sure if all three of your kids enjoy that. She starts this section at page 250. She says, one way to engage our kids in conversations about neurodifferences and personal growth is to get into the brain science behind it. And obviously this is kid specific, but I do know that a lot of kids with neurodifference or neurodivergence going on enjoy this aspect, this kind of side of learning about things. And we 100% in our house talk about the science of brain development and decision making and all of those things, and then relate that to why certain things are this way, or why we are making decisions about this, or why we encourage him to wait for this or that or the other thing. And I think it can be quite useful.
Mm-hmm. I think it can also be pretty helpful in bridging the gap if your brain doesn't operate the way your kids' brains do. I mean, we do know now that things like ADHD and autism are highly genetic. So odds are good that one parent in your household is probably on the same wavelength, but the other one might not be, or maybe neither if you are. It's not a guarantee. It could have skipped a generation, come from somewhere else in the family tree. Your child might be adopted, whatever the case might be. But I think having those conversations helps bridge the gap too, where sometimes we'll talk about something and my kid's like, yeah, that's not how I receive information from my eyeballs to my brain. And I'm like, really? And he's like, no, that's not how that works. And so I find that bridges some gaps for us as well.
Yeah, no, I can totally see that. I know in our home, one parental figure has one neurodifference and the other parental figure has a different neurodifference. And then our kiddo is the 2-week kiddo in the mix. And so neither one of the parents fully get the experience and the life of the kid. And so, yeah, that really understanding the science, right? Science is real. It's true. It's reproducible, and understanding that and how that impacts and plays into things can be hugely helpful for everyone in the family.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. So the next section is called Use Language That Supports, Not Shames.
Yeah.
I got nothing in this one, but I think you do.
I mean, generally speaking, it was all just using very positive pro-kid friendly language. But I did like this one just as a reminder. I don't think it's a super brand new topic, but it can be super challenging when you're caught up in the moment and tensions rising and tempers are going and everybody's getting dysregulated. It can be really easy to try to fix things in that moment or to rationalize why things are happening in that moment. And just a kind of a blanket reminder that bringing up challenges and difficult moments, she says, wait until the storm has blown over and then look for opportunities to debrief in a calm environment. And yes, that is 100% just a great reminder, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Trying to tackle it when everyone is still like super dysregulated is not gonna work for
Yeah.
probably anyone, including the person who's trying to tackle it.
Yeah. I might be married to that person, so that one like really resonates because I'm like, now's not the time. You know?
Not gonna lie, I was thinking pretty much the exact same thing. The number of times that I'm like, not now, not now.
Like, can you read this room? Are we in the same room? I can't.
And the answer is no.
Yeah.
No, he can't read the room. That's why. Yeah.
There's a diagnosis for that. Yeah, exactly. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, there is. Okay, so remember the next section is called Remember that Everything is an Opportunity for Growth. This one for me was a little like, well, yeah, I mean, I generally believe that for the most part, like just as a general way of life. But I did think that she had a couple good, like, kind of food for thought things that, like, if this is not the way you approach life, these might be good examples for you. So she says, here's what that might sound like in a variety of situations. I noticed you turned off your computer without any yelling today. How did you do that? What do you think is different about today compared with yesterday? Or have you noticed that getting out the door for school at the end of the week is much harder than at the beginning of the week? Do you have any ideas about why that might be? Or it seems like when you're listening to soft classical music, you're better able to focus on your homework. Or insane EDM music, apparently, Megan's house. Have you noticed a connection? And then she's got a few others, but just that idea of when you notice something as the grown up, not saying, well, I've noticed when you do this, this is what happens. And so we need to, like this is one of those excellent examples of modeling for your kids and kind of walking them to finding the conclusion themselves. It's a great skill to develop. You can scaffold it now as a kid, and then they'll be better at it when they're the grown up in the room.
Mm-hmm. And I just kind of highlighted a synopsis of what you just said, basically, which is a little further down on that page. And it says the key is looking for opportunities to help your child make connections between their thoughts, feelings, and action by regularly asking questions in a non-judgmental way. And I did just note on the one about school, like it's easier at the beginning of the week than at the end of the week. And it says, do you have any ideas about why that might be? And so I will just say, if you have my oldest child, that question would not work because the answer would be no. So it needs to be an open question. And then we might get somewhere, right? But I would just be cautious about using yes or no's if you have a pretty closed, really turtle shelled of a human that you're raising, because I have one of those.
Yeah, I could totally see that.
Yeah.
So like, do you notice? No.
No.
What do you notice is the difference. You can't just say no.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
mean, you can, but it's a little weird and awkward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right. So the next section is called Make Self-Discovery a Priority for You Too. This is the last section in this tilt. And for me, I was like, this is just another one of those things. We just talked about it in our regular episode this week on Tuesday. What is the culture in your home? Kids model the bad, whether you stub your toe and curse, and the good, the way that you treat your friends, the way that you take care of yourself. And so just this thing of like, she has a lot to say in here. She's got her ideas and stuff. But I think the bottom line is, if you are doing it for yourself, if you're making this part of the culture in your home, your kids are much more likely to do it for themselves, or to at least grow up doing it for themselves. They might not be great at it as a kid. Like they're much better at modeling and mimicking the bad things than the good things when they're younger. But they'll get there if it's just part of how you do life.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. And so then we wrap up this tilt with a start now box. Like always, she says, introduce your child to Carol Dweck's theory of mindset and work together with them to identify where they land on the map of growth mindset versus fixed mindset. We didn't really talk about that. She does cover that a little bit more in this tilt and talking about the idea of growth mindset. I don't think anyone is going to be surprised to know that she's pro growth mindset. And so, yeah, it's good. I think learning about growth mindset and being aware of that is a good thing. So take it and run with it. Okay. All right. Now, before we get into the next tilt, just quickly want to remind you that we have a Patreon and it is getting much more active. There's a lot more going on over there. So you should totally come check us out. You'll have a hard time finding it. It's called Homeschool Moms Unfiltered. I know we're so clever and creative with these names. So yeah, it's not just for moms. It's for anyone who wants to come and hang out with us. We just happen to be two moms and it's our podcast. So we named it after ourselves. We get a strange amount of pushback on that. I wonder how many people tell Stark Raving Dad that he can't have Stark Raving Dad in his title when people are like, but you have moms, you're just for moms, you're not inclusive. Like, well, actually, anyway.
Good point.
Yeah, I mean, that I feel like that's kind of one of those like patriarchy's winning there, people. Let's be careful. So yeah, come join us on Patreon. We have communities. We have a free option where you can just kind of be in the know about some stuff that's going on. I am working to start doing like a monthly newsletter for the free folks that are over there. Well, everyone will get it, but if you're a free member, you will also get it. And then we have a lot of other content that is locked down for different levels. So like the $7 level, you get the monthly unit study instead of having to pay $10 a pop for it. And then there's like a $12 level and a $20 level, and they have different things, but they include live things and chat groups and just all kinds of stuff. So come check us out, give us a follow, and then you can decide once you've given us a follow what you want to do. And they send out random promos. Like I know just this morning, so I have the owner account, and then I also have a free member account so that I can see when we're testing things out and we know whether or not we've messed up on the things we're trying to send out. And on my free member account, just this morning, I got an email from them saying that if I wanted to sign up, I could get 60% off my first month. And I was like, oh, that's a nice promo. So yeah, definitely come join us. Check it out. We'd love to have you over there.
Nice. I love a good discount and coupon code.
Okay, so that brings us to our last tilt of Debbie Reber's Differently Wired book, The End of an Era. All right, so tilt 18 is called If It Doesn't Exist, Create It.
So I literally, in the Kindle, you can highlight text and then add little notations to it. And I literally highlighted, if it doesn't exist, create it. And just made a note that was like, sure, I'll get to that in my spare time, Debbie. Thanks so much. But the reality is, it's true. I've totally created social groups that my kids have needed. I've created a whole bunch of stuff. When my kids have needed it, I've created it. But gosh, it takes a lot of work and effort when it doesn't exist, right? Like nobody's denying the fact that it's like, oh yeah, just start a co-op because there isn't one that's inclusive in your area. Okay, yeah, it's a lot of work. So I totally get it. But I just thought the title was I was feeling snarky when I read the title and I was like, I'll get right on that. Sure.
I love it. Well, for me, for this whole chapter, if you listen to us regularly, this is going to be shocking. I have like all of 3 notes for this entire tilt because this tilt just didn't really resonate all that much for me. But also she says that this tilt is basically kind of like wrapping up all of the previous tilts. So maybe that's why for me, I feel like we covered each tilt so thoroughly that this one is like a bit of a just synopsis repeat. I'm not entirely sure, but I won't have as much to say. That's a lie. I always have plenty to say, but I don't have as many quotes and book notes. All right.
Okay, and then I cracked up when I saw you write that note because I have so many highlights in this chapter. Because for me, it felt like, so I've never been in an MLM, but I've watched like docuseries about them and stuff like that. And then there was even that one, what's the one? Okay, so there's 2 things on Netflix. One is an Emily Blunt movie that's just like a 2-hour movie where she's a drug rep. But then there's the other one about the OxyContin that's based upon that whole family. And it's like a 5 or 6 part series. And in that, they have these big, like, rah-rah meetings for OxyContin sales where they have, like, dancing OxyContin pills and stuff like that. And it's so sick. And it's based on true stuff. Like, it's so sick, right? It's all based upon, like, how corrupt the Sackler family was and stuff like that. And they would have these huge rallies where they would come together with these cheerleaders in OxyContin uniforms. And they'd be like, Oxy, and the crowd would yell, Contin, right? And it was like these things. So to me, this chapter felt like like the end of an MLM conference when they bring out like a Casey and the Sunshine cover band, and there's this huge like rah rah, you can take on the world and you're all going to make millions of dollars, right? And everybody, even though it's not logical, gets like sucked into the energy and the vibe in the room. That's what this chapter was for me, because I was like, yes, I like it, right? It was just kind of like that thing. So
And as the MLM lady in the twosome here, I have intimate experience with getting sucked in at the very end of the conference and how exhilarating it is. I just did not experience that with this chapter, but I understand.
yeah, that's totally what it reminded me of. I liked it. When I watched that one about the LuLaRoe leggings and the people would be like, so I liked it. It's like in the first section here called Bring in Choice. You've got a note. You want to do your note before, or you want me to do my note first? What makes more sense? My note is basically to read the whole section because I really liked this.
Okay, I'll do my note first then. So the first section here is called Being in Choice.
Oh, thank you. I said that wrong.
Oh, you're fine. It totally cracked me up because we had a marriage counselor who was always talking about being in relationship and whether or not you were choosing to be in relationship with your partner or something else. And it was one of those, like, it was an interesting idea the first couple times she introduced it. And then like, as the sessions progressed, it would be like, so honey, are you being in relationship right now? Do you feel like you're in relationship or not? So yeah. Being in choice was probably not the right wording for me.
It did not give you the MLM rah-rahs. So there's a bit here in that section where she talks about interviewing this guy, Zachary Morris, et cetera, et cetera. And he said, I would say there's never anything we have to do. We always have choice. We might base those choices on certain perceived repercussions in relation to what our needs and intentions are. And so we get directed by our experience and what we are trying to manifest for ourselves. We're talking about manifesting. I was highlighting this. And for our children. But ultimately, we always get to choose. So I would encourage parents to really question the quote unquote have to mindset that we can so easily slip into. Parents are the best advocates for their children. We can stand up to the existing structures if they're not working for us and figure out other options. And at the end of that section, Debbie Reber says, on rough days, I still question what I'm doing, what our non-traditional education and life choices will look like down the road. And that's when I draw upon the work of author and thought leader Simon Sinek, who in his book, Start With Why, explains the benefits of focusing on the why before getting caught up in the how and the what. And we've talked about this so many times with understanding the why for your homeschooling. Although his message is geared towards leaders, I found that the same idea applies to every aspect of life. When we home in on our personal why for doing anything, including why we're making the bold choices and creating what our atypical child needs, the how and what become not only easier, but doable. Instead of feeling trapped and powerless, we can embrace a mindset of freedom and the belief that anything is possible. It's MLM-y, isn't it? It's like very rah, rah, OxyContin. Okay, we're good. Yeah.
I'm going to back up to the beginning of that quote and say it did not help. Okay, so I completely procrastinated on getting things ready for recording today. And I was in bed this morning. Literally, I was still in bed like 22 minutes before we were supposed to start recording. But when I woke up this morning, I was very lazy and the kiddo came and crawled into bed with hubby and I, and we had our morning snuggle and a talk. We usually start the weekends with like a talk, like, what would you like to do this weekend? What do you need to do this weekend? And then we kind of coordinate our schedules and make sure we all get it done. And the kiddo said, what would you like to do this weekend? How would you like today to go? And I said, man, today I would love to have a really lazy morning, have breakfast in bed, and then get up and get around, go down to the outlet mall to pick up those things that we need, then maybe swing by the grocery store to get the rest of the groceries I need for cooking this weekend, and like just, get things done, but at like a nice, really chill rate. And he was like, okay, that sounds good. So what do you need to do this weekend? I was like, or what do you need to do today? And I was like, well, I need to quickly grab some coffee. Then I need to get my book. I need to finish reading the chapter. Then I need to actually get my computer. I need to type up all of the notes. I need to review the notes for regular podcast. And then I got to actually like get up, put clothes on, take care of my hair, put some makeup on, and actually be recording by 11. And he was like, okay, then. So while I do agree that most things in life are choices and it's not an actual need, there are like, I think it's going a little far to say that like everything is a choice and you only make those choices based on repercussions. Like, I mean, yes, in theory, it comes down to as simple as like, well, you didn't want the repercussion of not showing up for the podcast like you committed to doing. But like, nah, you committed to it. It's a need. Show the hell up. All right. So then we've got a section called Get Inspired. After Get Inspired, because yay, rah rah MLM, we've got Create Your Own Cheering Squad. Again, goes hand in hand with yay, rah rah MLM. Then remember that you are more powerful than you know. And I do think there's some truth to this. We often forget just how much power we have, right? So the quote that I pulled out, she said on page 262, when you're motivated by love and commitment to doing what it takes to help our children thrive, only a fool would underestimate what we're capable of. And for me, I was just like, okay, yeah, that's probably the best quote out of the whole tilt for me. That could be our mantra of the day, though we don't do mantras for book club. But yeah, that's a solid one.
And then the last section, I'm going to let you kind of keep rocking this, Amanda, because my hotel internet is having a moment. The last section here is called Start Somewhere, Start Now.
Yeah. So for in this last section on page 264, she has a quote that says, the important thing is to give yourself permission to take it slow and steady and just start, right? This idea, start somewhere, start now. It doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to know for sure what you're doing. You don't have to have a great plan. Just start. Just take the leap, start now. And then we have the start now box, right? So start now, start now, start now. The final box, she says, grab a sticky note or open a page in your journal and boldly answer this question. What would I create in support of my child if I knew I would succeed? Then commit to taking one step toward making that vision a reality.
I like it. That was a pretty doable
Yeah.
one. I like it. I have had something on my mind for some time, for a few years now that I haven't, but it might be time. Debbie Reber might give me the kick in the pants I need. Well, thing.
Yeah. And then I was like, man, I feel like I'm failing as a parent and a homeschool parent and a podcaster who apparently gives advice because I don't know what I would create. So sorry, kid.
Yeah, I don't think you have to create anything. You're probably already doing what works. So, why fix what's not broken?
Yeah,
Yeah.
there is that. For anyone who is reading along or is still wondering if they want to actually get the book from the library, at the end of the tilts, she does have a list of some of her favorite resources, like websites, organizations, books. Lots of them are still around and valid and recommended. A few of them have gone by the wayside or have been, there are some better options out there, but a lot of them are actually still really solid. And she does cite some of her sources. And then I don't know if Megan's Kindle book has it, but my hard copy book has book club questions, which is something I always find interesting, like some good noodling, food for thought kind of jumping off points.
I like it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So thanks for joining us today.
Okay. So Megan is still here. If you're watching the video, you see that she's coming in and out because she's got internet problems. So I'm just going to quickly wrap this up. Again, we love you and we're happy that you're here with us. And if you have time, we would really appreciate it if you could go like, share, leave us a review. We say it all the time, but we're really not needy people. It's just that this world that we live in now, everything is run by algorithms, whether we like it or not. And so any sort of engagement like that, especially on the actual like podcast platforms, it does make a pretty big difference for us. And so we would just really appreciate it if you took a second and like it, share it, write a quick review, whatever. Yeah. So we'd super appreciate that. And then again, please do not forget that next week we are starting The Belief Book by David McAfee. I think it's going to be really solid. It gets recommended in a lot of groups, but neither one of us have actually read it. So it's going to be fun to kind of go through several of the books that people often recommend for like, how do I teach religion and Christianity and all of these things in a secular way? Like my kids need to know this stuff, but I'm definitely not looking for religious indoctrination. These are the things that or some of the things that often get recommended. So we're going to read them and talk about our thoughts and whether or not we would use them with our own kids.
Yeah, I'm excited. I saw him speak last year at a homeschool conference, so I'm pretty pumped about reading the book, and what he said in the conference I liked. So I'm optimistic
Nice.
that the books will be good too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
So awesome. Well, apologies for my technical issues today. I popped in and out like mad at the end, but hopefully by the end of this, we'll have a solid recording. We'll see what happens. And we will catch you all next week with some brand new content. It's going to be super exciting.
Yeah.
All right.
In the meantime, happy homeschooling.
Have a great day.